So we start. The focus today is on democracy and good governance in Nigeria. And like I said, most times people take democracy as sine qua non, the road to development. But 21 years down the line, 21 years of uninterrupted democracy in Nigeria, we realize that we are still not where we think. I don't know what's happening to my network. Today's sorry. Okay. It's I don't understand what's happening. The network is really unstable today. Okay, I think we'll just go on. So, but today, like I was saying, today we realize that 21 years after we experienced democracy for 21 years, we still not get to the dreamland that we have said that both the civil rights activists and the scholar activists fought hard for. Today, we are seeing all manner of drama in our political climate, and it's most times it's not what we think we bargain for. What exactly is the missing link? Some are of the view that the missing link between democracy and development is good governance. The question then is, do we have the kind of good governance that can drive development in Nigeria today? If we have, what is happening and what has caused the kind of underdevelopment or pseudo-development that we are experiencing? We have Professor Dejo Oluwu, who will lead the discussion. Professor Dejo Oluwu, you have the floor for 10 to 12 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll put the time. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I must start up front by asserting that the entity called Nigeria is only an abstract concept. Nigeria does not dwell in the consciousness of the people any more than Atlantis, El Dorado, or Siberia does. The country known as Nigeria has been a mere political metaphor since our inception. Hence, all the negativities that we see and hear in reality are symbols and symptoms of age-long anomy. My assertions here are neither esoteric nor theoretical. They are not products of brainwave. They are founded on my sustained first-hand engagement with the polity, as well as my empirical encounters with the dynamics of democracy, governance, and development in Nigeria among the African Community of Nations. Because space and time will not permit us to even attempt to analyze all the indicators of these conflicted concepts in the Nigerian context, have zeroed in on 5 key sectors, namely insecurity of lives and property, massification of poverty, menace of pervasive corruption, subversion of the rule of law, and absence of development-oriented leadership. My concentration on these 5 key indicators arose out of the fragility of Nigerian state. These 5 core problems, take note, coalesced when all the previous republics in Nigeria collapsed. In other words, all these 5 key indicators were there when every republic that Nigeria ever experimented failed. And tragically, all these 5 key indicators still subsist today in various forms and to various degrees in our current republican existence. My take is that since the foundations of Nigeria were fraudulent, flawed, fictitious, and fractured from the very onset, the graphics of her dubious existence as a nation state are what she has been exhibiting for the past 6 decades and all the way to 1914. It will never matter where you harvest the human operators of our governance structures and systems from. The current realities and contradictions will not get any better unless our fundamental premises and perimeters are mutually revisited and consensually redesigned to establish her as a legitimate modern state with an ethical compass. In my prognosis, and I don't take this lightly, in my candid prognosis, restructuring is cosmetic and futile. I am not a fan of it. I'm not a subscriber to restructuring. Restructuring is nothing but a perpetuation of the entrenched falsehoods and fictions and deceits that have become hallmarks of Nigeria since the illicit amalgamation of 1914. The same way the colonial masters preached amalgamation in 1914 is the same way we are hearing the message and gospel of restructuring in the 21st century. I don't buy into it. I hope to expatiate on this profound sentiment in the course of the program. Thank you.
So, Professor Dejolu, that's a very good intro. Professor Francis Ofor, you have the floor. You need to unmute from your side, sir. Yes, you have the floor, sir. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Let me start by once again appreciating the organizers of this event for the opportunity for us to air our views on this very important subject matter. Well, and I'm also grateful to you, Yemi, that you gave us the laxity to come into this discourse from any perspective you find convenient. So I'm going to do my discussion on a note of skepticism on how democracy is to be properly construed. You see, it is really time for us to sit back and examine the issue of democracy and good governance as it pertains to the dream that democracy promises, the reality on ground at the moment, and then what has happened that is making us to question the issue of these dreams being unfulfilled. Now, I wouldn't want to bore us by starting with the issue of the meaning of democracy, because democracy, as we have come to know it, is not only fluid and elastic, even its expression and concrete form, as we have it in the present time, varies from society to society. And that is why we can commonly sit back and talk about Athenian democracy, for instance, American democracy, British democracy, African democracy, and it will permit me the Nigerian democracy. So the question of which understanding or definition that will better capture the essential features of the various forms of democracy found in the different parts of the world today remains a difficult one to answer. And until we understand what democracy is actually, or how it should be effectively construed, then the issue of drawing the link between democracy and good governance and synthesizer between democracy and development becomes a difficult one to handle. Even the popular Lacanian definition of democracy that defines democracy as going to the people, for the people, by the people, has become very misleading because of the challenge of effectively calibrating who the people really are in this definition. And of course, within the Nigerian context, this understanding of democracy practically annihilates the rest of us. Government of the people, for the people, by the people. We are witnesses to what is happening in the country today. So certainly that definition will not hold sway when it comes to divine democracy the way Lincoln did. In fact, the closest expression of the meaning of democracy is what I see as a set of government where every individual participates in the process of governance, either maximally or minimally. Maximally as an elected representative, and minimally through elected representatives. But within the context of this practice are certain features and ideas that are laced around the structures, the interests, the will, the fundamental rights, and the general well-being of citizens. This explains why I think, in my opinion, the meaning, the tenets, and ideas of democracy must continually revolve and be understood within the context of the general rules, needs, rights, and welfare of citizens, as well as the prevailing socio-economic and cultural circumstances of society at any given point in time. Now, the point I'm trying to drive home here is that democracy need not be defined, understood, and practiced in strict adherence to those features, those structures and attributes that define it in any Western conception. In other words, the cut and paste approach of African nations to the practice of democracy amounts, in my opinion, to attempting to jumpstart democracy on Africa's political tarmac that winds upwards. From my little experience of jumpstarting a car, for instance, I know you do that either on a plane surface or on a slopey surface. But when you attempt to jumpstart a car on a tarmac that winds upwards, then there will be challenges. There will be challenges. That exactly is the problem that we have today. So we have been trying all this while to jumpstart democracy on our own political tarmac that obviously winds upwards, and it will not work. So this is the bane, and this has remained the main reason practice of democracy over the past 20 years has not yielded good governance that will effectively bring about development in all ramifications. Now, talking about development, of course, we know that the existence of any form of government is justified mainly in terms of its ability to bring about development. And development is only possible where there is good governance. In other words, good governance always endangers development. And the consensus of opinion in the literature is that good governance is a necessary consequence of a genuine democracy. Good governance, which democracy actualizes, enhances development at both the individual and societal level. That is all-round development. And this remains the dream of every democratic arrangement. But the question now is, like you said earlier, Mr. Moderator, why is it that we have failed as a nation to achieve meaningful development despite our practice of democracy since the past 2 or even 3 decades? You go back to the Baghdad era, those party democracy, the practice is a form of democracy in a way. Well, how come for the past 2 decades we have not been able to achieve meaningful development? We all know that nature has bestowed on this country enough resources to turn things around. So if democracy, which is supposed to produce good governance, that will bring about oral development, is not able to harness our fortunes and realize our dream, then it is indeed a failed venture in Nigeria. So the question persists. Why have we been developing retrogressively? Now forget about the reasons that have been adduced by scholars of various persuasions. By the first speaker, Professor Dejolu, mentioned some of these reasons: corruption, bad leadership, neocolonialism, influence, and so on and so forth. These are issues, but as far as I think, the crux of the matter, or what I'm going to call the cocoa of the matter, is our misadaptation, our betrayal, and our gross subversion of a fundamental principle axiomatic to a decorous democracy. And that singular principle is the principle of dialogue. You see, let me explain this way. Democracy is not just a system of government with certain defining structures and ideals. Democracy as a term more aptly describes any mode of governance, of course, with certain defining values, principles, rules, precepts, according to which a good government must be run, no matter the institutional form. But such values, such rules, such precepts are not defined elsewhere and imported to other societies. Rather, they have to be agreed upon in a rational public deliberation by the people concerned. People will have to sit. They have to first deliberate on how best to govern themselves. They have to agree on principles and procedures before they eventually embark on the practice or art of governance. Now, if you take your mind back to the practice of democracy in ancient Greece, we all had a practice with direct democracy where it seems simple and so on and so forth. But a critical scrutiny will reveal that even this practice of democracy, as early as that period, must have been preceded by some form of deliberation and agreement, at least on principles, on issues, and on matters that are procedural. Of course, it would be incongruous for us to think that the Greek just woke up one day and started practicing democracy without first agreeing on certain principles that will guide them in the process of carrying out the art of governance. If you also look through the books, the history of political thought reveals that early theorists, social contract theorists, Locke, Rousseau, Hobbes, and others, who theorized about the state and government, insisted that government itself is a product of deliberation. So we need to dialogue. And that is the point I made earlier by saying that that principle that is axiomatic to a decorous democracy is the principle of dialogue. We need to dialogue in order to be able to evolve the right principles, the correct institutions and structures upon which our modern practice of democracy will be founded. This is the only way we would evolve a mode of governance that would transcend specific historical institutional forms and structures and yet still remain truly democratic. The point is this, and that's the mistake I think we'll be making. Democracy has no end state. It is not yet fully defined and jacketed by others. So we just go there and pick it up. What makes a system democratic is not bicameralism. It's not, because let me give you a little analogy. For instance, by saying that democracy pertains only strictly to systems of governance that runs effectively in an environment. I live in Ibadan. We all live in different parts of the country. If, for instance, the Olubadan of Ibadan makes a proclamation today that I have been declared the personal non grata in Ibadan, that he doesn't want me around here, do you think I will still feel comfortable remaining in Ibadan and doing business here? The answer is no. But the question is, where is the place of Ibadan, for instance, of that institution in the entire so-called practice of democracy? These are issues we should look at. So it's not about copy and paste. That's where we are getting from. We have to come together and then sit and then agree on principles, design structure. By agreement and dialogue, we can then come up with a model that will work. And why it works for me, that is democracy. It doesn't have to be patterned after any form of democracy from the West or elsewhere. So democracy, like I said, has no end state. It has not been defined. There's no QED attached to it. All right? So dialogue and becoming are very critical features of a genuine democracy. What we have been doing really is that we have been putting the cart before the horse. And that has been the reason our practice of democracy these past years has not yielded good governance and societal development in all ramifications. So I hope to elaborate on this much later in the course of our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Francis Ofor, for that illuminating presentation. No doubt about it. Putting the cart before the horse is your final submission, and the lack of dialogue is one of the banes of what we think we have. The problem of becoming and that of dialogue become the critical issue you highlighted, in addition to the idea of restructuring that Professor Dejolu really asks that we will reconsider. Professor Ebenezer Ayebisi, you have the floor. You can pick it up from where Professor Dejo and Professor Francis left it off, or you channel a different path, because we realize that there are so many ways to kill this big elephant called democracy and good governance. Professor Ayebisi, you have the floor, sir. You need to unmute, sir. You need to unmute, sir, Prof. You need to unmute.
Unmute.
You need to unmute, sir.
On the left side, bottom left corner.
Oh, cool. Oh,
okay.
Good. Oh, cool. We can hear you now.
Now, thank you very much,
Professor Ayebisi, please, just 1 minute. While Professor Forward, while he was presenting, Professor Femi Oloke-Susi joined us. Professor Oloke-Susi, you are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir. Professor Ayebisi, please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I have heard Professor Ologu as well as Professor Francis Ofo, and I don't think I disagree at all with them, and except that, like you suggested, I have to take off from somewhere else rather than flogging the dead sheep. I want to say that I want to believe in any form of governance which would, at the end of the day, provide for the common good. So whether you call it democracy or whatever form, I'm not very concerned about what you want to call it. Because anytime the military interregnum is over and we have a civilian administration coming in, we have the whole country hoping that, well, these are the people being sent as messiahs to change things. And if you look around us, most times it turns out that they are worse than those they left behind. I mean, they took over from. So I want to limit myself really to the provisions of the Constitution. And my first point of call is section 14(1) of the Constitution that states that the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be based on the principles of democracy and social justice. Well, I don't know if it's the type of democracy Professor Francis Ofo is thinking about, or the one being thought of by Professor Ologu and others who will follow. Me, I don't call it democracy. What is being practiced here is no democracy as far as I'm concerned. It is civilian administration. I prefer to call it that rather than call it democracy, because as stated, democracy in this. For example, it includes equal opportunities for all, fundamental recognition of popular sovereignty, representative consensus on fundamental issues, as well as periodical elections, which guarantee the Constitution guarantees. But the way we practice it here, you agree with me, is flawed in several ways. Today, you have a system where power is for sale to the highest bidder. People's vote don't count really. It goes by several names. In the state where I reside, we call it stomach infrastructure. In other places, they will give it their own names. The Constitution provides a fine document with that statement. Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be based on the principles of democracy and social justice. The Constitution further strengthened this section by providing that in section 16, 1 and 2, for a litany of objectives, which when vigorously pursued can ensure that what was often called our endowment could be shared without rancor by all. But what today you find is that these things have been cornered. It's been cornered. You get to power, you get a few things needed by you only when you are connected to somebody. Either by a state of origin, by birth, connections to some godfathers, and even religion. Well, whether it's Lincoln or anybody before him, I don't think that was the idea of democracy. Now, governance. Anytime you mention the term good governance, you think of the other side of the coin too, bad governance. That is when the debate comes in. And here we might descend into morality and ethical issues. But we should remember that good governance must have some firm moorings to certain moral values and principles. The issue of governance, although significantly related to democracy, is culture specific and system bound. It depends to a large extent on the historical experiences of the nation, its cultural mores, aspirations of the people, and the stated political and economic objectives of the state, including the individuals and group preferences, current issues, the expectations of the governed, the nature and type of a political system, its ideological and religious predispositions of the state, and a host of others. I started from the Constitution. The Constitution seemed to provide for all this. But Where is the political will to see this through? You start from the executive. You get your leaders there through a lot of shenanigans. You say this man is a Muslim, so he should be your leader. This man mounts, so he should be your leader. I mean, he mounts anti-corruption, he should be your leader. Is anti-corruption alone the bane of our society? Or the fact that a particular person comes from a particular part of the country? The sole criteria for electing a leader. Today, many people are holding offices not because of their antecedents, which you say where the angels will praise, but because they know somebody is a godfather, somebody was brought by somebody, somebody is an in-law. My wife should even hold a position. She should be a senator for me to be relevant. You come to the legislators. These are people sent there to make laws for the good governance of our country. But what do you
Professor UBC.
bought SUVs?
Professor UBC, we're having technical issues with you. Oh, technical problem. Technical problem with Professor UBC. Professor UBC, you are back. You are back.
Yes.
On mute.
Okay, good. You have 2 minutes to round off, please.
Okay, well, we talk about let me move straight to the judiciary. Our judiciary today, I will say, is not independent at all. And if their job is to ensure that these other people are put in check, a judiciary which is dependent on the executive, I don't see where the judiciary is going to take us. And in any country where you've been able to meet out the judiciary, then forget about democracy or good governance. Our judiciary today has been overtaken by the executive. See how Chief Justices are changed. Judges are raided at night. Money needed to run the judiciary, you have to go cap in hand. So I'm sorry, well, the country seems to be doomed. And like the earlier speaker said, that thing called Nigeria, let's give it another name. If the earlier speaker is muting the issue of restructuring, he find me as a supporter. Who is afraid of restructuring? Who is afraid of restructuring? It is the few who, when it comes to competition, which our democracy encourages, you won't find them. They will only survive when there's no competition, where merit is thrown overboard. But if you want to install merit, let's go back to restructuring and give restructuring a chance. Well, I believe in the course of our discussions, I'll have the opportunity to explain some of my points and then.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for your submission, sir. You have nothing against restructuring, and you also think dialogue. We need to dialogue and understand our fundamental existence, what our existence is all about, which reflects in your suggestion that if we have to change the name Nigeria and change the nomenclature and also the modus operandi with which it operates now, you have nothing against it. Okay, let's go to Professor Femi Olokechusi. Professor Femi Olokechusi, please. Are you with us?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir, please, sir. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Let me apologize for joining late. I had some problem with my system. Let me also appreciate my predecessors for their contributions. I want to examine the topic from a slightly different perspective, and that is trying to examine good governance and sustainable tourism development. It's a sectoral approach. You recall that during President Obama's first visit to Africa, in Accra, he said that what Africa needs are strong institutions rather than strong men or strong leaders. And you also recall that in the publication of, excuse me, John Robinson, Why Nations Fail, he also alluded to the fact that strong institutions determine the level of poverty or wealth of nations. And for countries like Nigeria, weak governance adversely impacts on development. Now, governance and sustainable development are related. I mean, good governance especially. Governance came into the international discourse in the 80s. And at a point in time, the Bretton institutions, that is the World Bank, IMF, and IDA, decided not to give aid to countries not showing visible good governance principles. Even some developed countries followed suit. Now, you'll find out that tourism is a multi-sectoral industry, and it needs good governance because of the diverse nature of the industry. You have the hotels, parks, travels, and what have you, highly sectoral. And institutions are required for the purposes of coordination and good service delivery. And Nigeria, as a matter of fact, has, since the middle 1970s, have been having dreams about the potentials inherent in tourism development. You find out that in 1975, Nigeria had its first tourist development board through a decree published in 1976. Then we note that the government came up in 1990 with a tourism policy called National Trade and Tourism Policy. The inspiration for that policy, according to the documents, are two. One, the perceived growing importance of tourism in global economics. And secondly, the need to diversify the Nigerian economy. Against this background, I want to say that what is sustainable tourism development and why is it important for us as a nation? Well, it simply means sustainable tourism development simply means development that meets the needs of the present tourists and host communities without compromising the future needs of tourists. That is, the issue of intergenerational equity comes into play, and the need to follow the pillars of that tourism, which are economic, social, and environmental in nature. Let me now go to a few principles of governance, which I had Professor Ofor and Professor Yebisi mention some of them. The issue of transparency, accountability, equity, and inclusiveness, and so on and so forth. Those are principles which are also important, and they are actually entrenched in the Code of Ethics for Tourism, as agreed to under the framework of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And the Nigeria state has to be involved in tourism development, like I said, for coordination, and also because it represents the country in international discourse. For example, Nigeria is a member of IATA, it's a member of ICAO, ACA. These are organizations, international organizations for the purposes of developing tourism sustainably. After the 1990 tourism policy was failed to transform the sector, in 2005, two landmark events occurred. One was the formulation of a new tourism policy, and secondly, for the first time, Nigeria had a tourism development master plan. And the master plan made several laudable suggestions based on the principle of sustainability. One of these suggestions was the creation of 5 tourism clusters. Secondly, it was recommended that there should be a tourism development fund to be created and monies transferred into it, just like a TED fund for the tertiary education development in the country. Then the late President Musa Yar'Adua initiated the Nigeria Vision 2020, in fact, which by this time Nigeria should have been one of the top 20 countries in the world from the economic perspective. But we all know what has happened. And that particular plan gave priority status to tourism development. In fact, the document said the international arrivals should increase by 50% every year, which is a very tall order indeed. That is by then the economic recovery and growth plan, which is the first medium-term development plan produced by the Buhari administration, was launched in 2017. Again, gave priority to tourism development and made a series of recommendations. And in fact, the document says that the tourism arrivals, that is international tourism tourist arrivals, should increase 10% year after year. And then some strategies were put in place. The question now is, what are the realities on ground after all these beautiful development plans and policy documents? We will briefly examine this under international arrivals, contributions to employment by the tourism industry. Then we'll look at receipts, that is, monies brought in by tourists, international tourists, and then our ranking in international tourism competitiveness as a country. Now, arrivals.
3 minutes, Prof. 3 minutes more, sir.
Thank you. Arrival figures have been unstable, erratic in nature. The most recent data shows that it's about 1.2 million. The projection is about 1.3 million in 2027. Contribution to employment has been marginal, very marginal. The most recent figure is about 1.6% of the total employment in the country. Contribution to GDP, again, the most recent is 5%. In 2007, it was just 2%. All these are far below the level of the average for sub-Saharan Africa. Then in the area of competitiveness, and as we all know, competitiveness is highly important when it comes to economic development. In 2017, Nigeria was ranked 129 in the world out of 136 countries. In 2019, just last year, we were ranked again 129 out of 140 countries. And visitor exports have been rising generally. But now let me go to my conclusions and recommendations. Due to policy somersaults, bad governance, due to the absence of the principles of good governance in the country, the tourism industry has not been able to meet the aspirations and dreams of the Nigerian government. Also, several businesses in the industry belong to the SMEs. And like other SMEs, they are equally negatively affected by bad governance. So what do we do? There's a need for greater coordination of the sector. There's a need to inject the principles of good governance by all tiers of government. And of course, since governance is not limited to state actors, these businesses and other non-state actors should be properly coordinated and involved reasonably well in the process of transforming the Nigeria tourism industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Olufemi Olukeshusi. Thanks so much for that wonderful presentation. We all know that definitely democracy and good governance, where democracy did not bring good governance, the idea of tourism will be a mirage, because it's only when there's security and people are okay that they can think of tourism. And even no matter how many policies we're able to sign or key into, if all the arms of government are not able to do what they ought to do, then we are deceiving ourselves. Thanks so much, Professor Olufemi Olukeshusi. I'll go to Comrade Femi Aborijade. Comrade Aborijade, we'll take it back to, we'll start again from Professor Deji-Olu. And to Professor Deji-Olu, he highlighted all the major pain of our bad governance that we have in Nigeria today. And he is asking for the need for restructuring. Ditto Professor Francis Ofor, who look at the idea of skepticism and democracy, highlighting the basic things that we need to do, most especially the idea of understanding the place of dialogue in our system of becoming, because the entity called Nigeria, whether we like it or not, has not achieved what it ought to achieve in terms of linking democracy with development because of that lack of dialogue. Professor ABC look at the structure of governance, most especially government presently, most especially the judiciary, and to him, we are still far from what it is. In fact, he moved as far as suggesting that whatever Professor Deji-Olu was suggesting, which is about restructuring and that of dialogue, if we have to understand, even change the name Nigeria, we should. Professor Olufemi Olukeshusi leverage on these two and look at the question of tourism in Nigeria, vis-a-vis how bad governance has affected all the protocols Nigeria signed to in developing tourism. Comrade Femi Aborijade, you have been a civil rights activist for a long time. You are part of those who bet this democracy. Is this democracy you struggle to achieve, you struggle to bring to bear? 21 years down the line, is this what you expected? Where you expected that would be so far? You have the floor, sir. Professor Comrade Femi Aborijade.
Thanks very much, Mr. Moderator, Professor Adeyemi. Let me thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to partake in this assessment of democracy in Nigeria. Before I go into my own line of thought, let me say, first of all, that I absolutely agree with Professor Deji-Olu as far as his position is concerned on restructuring. I do not see restructuring as a way forward in Nigeria, though I do not oppose it in principle, but it is not the solution for the myriad of problems taking us. I also want to say that rather than talking about dialogue, democracy will not only involve dialogue. Of course, democracy can only be deepened through class struggle, not just a question of dialogue. There may be room for dialogue, but to make any fundamental way forward, it will involve the masses of the people taking on the challenge to influence the course of history. Now, I think that the theme of this discussion actually raises three main issues. One, is Nigeria a democracy? Is Nigeria democratic? Number two, what is actually the reality of Nigeria? If Nigeria is not a democracy, what should we do to make it one? Or what should we do to make it a better society? Unless we are able to pose this question and answer it in terms of identifying our task, flowing from our characterization of our reality, then the time and resources you have all put into organizing this event will have amounted to a total waste. As Karl Marx put it, philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. I am convinced that we all know that what we have in Nigeria is not democracy. So philosophers have interpreted the world. They have interpreted the reality of Nigeria. Our challenge is identifying our tasks to change our reality. And as Frantz Fanon also put it, every generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill that mission, or betray it. Now, in my presentation, I divided my presentation to 3 basic segments. One is that I look at democracy as an ideal, the goal of governance. I will not talk about good governance because the concept of good governance is too vague, it's too subjective, it's not precise. And it tends to take after the liberal democracies in the Western world. And the arrangement of society in the Western world does not actually meet my own dream. So I will use the concept of good democracy. But I see democracy as an ideal, as a goal to achieve. Second part is that I address the reality of Nigeria. If Nigeria is not a democracy, what actually is Nigeria? And lastly, I link the discussion to the COVID-19 funds that have been mobilized to pose the question whether or not the political arrangement we have will ensure that the masses of Nigeria benefit or do not benefit. So the first part, democracy as a dream. I always like to begin from the root of the word democracy, which is derived from 2 Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratia, meaning rule. Democracy, therefore, literally means the rule by the people. It suggests a system of government that is determined, inspired, nurtured, and sustained by the decisions, the desires, the interests, the welfare, aspirations, and hopes of the majority. Such that where we have a society where the hopes and aspirations of the majority do not determine government actions and inactions, we cannot say that we have democracy. In short, democracy enables or should facilitate the fulfillment of socio-economic rights. And I would like to quote, I also use the popular definition of democracy by Lincoln: government of the people, by the people, and for the people. From that definition by Lincoln, I also want to take a recourse, just like Professor Ebenezer did, to the constitutional provisions. Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution provides that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. If in that section 14(2)(b) we replace government by democracy, then that section will read, security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government, of democracy. In other words, if in any society, the security and welfare of the people are not guaranteed, we cannot claim to have democracy. And we must identify what is wrong. I also take a look at section 16(2)(b) of the Constitution. It provides that the state shall ensure that the material resources of the nation are annexed and distributed as best as possible to serve the common good. So where we have a society where the common good of the majority does not determine the actions and inactions of government, such a society cannot be described as being democratic. And lastly, as far as the Constitution is concerned, section 16(1)(b) of the Constitution provides that the state shall control the national economy in such manner as to secure the maximum welfare, the maximum freedom, and the maximum happiness of every citizen. Therefore, where the maximum welfare of ordinary people does not determine the actions and inactions of government, such a society cannot be said to be democratic. From the constitutional provisions that I have quoted, I pose the question, how do we measure democracy? And I say the measure of democracy is the abolition of material poverty and the guarantee of physical security. In other words, the end of democracy is welfare of ordinary people, is security of ordinary people. So I differ from that point of view from the colleague who said there is no end in state as far as democracy is concerned. I argue that the end of democracy is the well-being of ordinary people, the security of ordinary people. So, from these premises that we have established, can we say that Nigeria is a democracy? The answer, of course, is no. So what indeed then, how can we characterize governance in Nigeria? So what is the reality in Nigeria? In answering this question, I take a recourse to the thoughts of Peter Eke in his Nigeria's Emergent Political Culture. Peter Eke has helped to aptly characterize the African state, using the Nigerian state as a reference point. According to Eke, and I agree with him absolutely, the Nigerian state is a terrorist state, conceived, born, and nurtured to wage war against ordinary people with a view to achieving crude exploitation, ruthless subjugation, and total domination. In the words of Eke, I quote, far from being a product of its encasing society as its counterpart in European history and political experience, the African state wages war against African societies and lives apart from them, operating outside the norms of society. The African state is clearly arbitrary. The arbitrariness of the state has conferred on African political culture the attributes of negativity. African political culture has become characterized by a vast array of negative elements, such as corruption, violence, and mistrust. However, I think that even within this context of the African state, the Nigerian state, being a violent state, being a weapon of war against the interest of ordinary people, I think we should also periodize the history of Nigeria. And when we undertake a periodization of the history of Nigeria, we'll come to the conclusion that the history of Nigeria is not the history of democracy. The history of Nigeria is actually the history of dictatorship. from colonial military rule, because colonization is military rule by external forces, to the internal military dictatorship. And of course, I agree with Professor Ebenezer, who says that what we have is actually not a democracy, but civilian rule. But I also say, not just civilian rule, but civilian dictatorship. But within the context of civilian dictatorship, we must also periodize the history of Nigeria. In the past, before 1986, we had a state that was concerned with the general welfare of ordinary people, that adopted a centrist, a public, the public sector was regarded as the engine of growth. However, from 1986, pardon?
You have 2 minutes more, sir. We'll come back to you.
Okay. From 1986, there has been a paradigm shift from regarding the state as the engine of economic growth. The state successive government in Nigeria, have now perceived the state as being concerned with providing conducive atmosphere and shifting responsibility of the state to the private sector, and regarding the private sector as the engine of growth. And I think this is the major reason why the poverty question has been deepened in Nigeria. Now, I want to link our discussion to the COVID-19 funds. About 40 trillion naira has actually been mobilized by the state in the name of COVID-19 fund. I mean, in the name of COVID-19. But my concern is that these funds are not being devoted to meet the interests of ordinary people, but they are being devoted to serve the interests of big business. And particularly at this point in time, we must insist that COVID-19 funds and the wealth of society should be used to provide free medical care. We should go further to criminalize and prohibit medical tourism, so that we insist that our hospitals should be upgraded, more hospitals should be built, more doctors and medical workers should be employed, and they must be paid desirable wages. If we observe in virtually all the states of the Federation, medical workers, including medical doctors, have been on strike, fighting for the provision of PPE, fighting for payment of wages, fighting against 25% wage cut, as it happened in Kaduna State. In Ekiti State, only about 3 medical doctors manage a hospital. So we need to identify with these medical workers who have been fighting to salvage the medical sector in Nigeria, and insist that the COVID-19 funds are used for the improvement of the healthcare system, to provide free medical care, and prohibiting our rulers from embarking on medical tourism. Unless we do this, wealth will continue to be concentrated in the hands of a few. Concentrated funds in the hands of a few will lead to political capture. Political capture will lead to further economic and political exclusion. We must resist this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Comrade Femi Aborishade. For that socialist perspective, we shall come back to you later because we already have 1 or 2 questions that have been asked specifically to you and to other presenters. While Comrade Femi Aborishade was presenting his entry contribution, Dr. Tunde Hussaini from LCU joined us. Dr. Tunde Hussaini, you came right on time because it's your time to present. Dr. Tunde Hussaini, you have the floor for 10 to 12 minutes.
All right. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first of all point out that the name being displayed is not my name. I don't know why we have Hakeem Akinshola there, but I know one of my research assistants.
Okay.
So far, I think I've gained a lot. All right, thank you so much. Okay, maybe you registered, I think.
Yes.
I've gained a lot from this conversation, and I'm going to continue or probably leverage on the contribution of the last speaker, very popular, vibrant socialist activist, Comrade Aborishade. He was talking about class struggle, talking about constitutional premises for democratic dividends. I think that is important. However, let me point out that when we say that good governance is the plug, and I'm borrowing that from the flyer by the organizers, that good governance is the plug between democracy and development. I want to add as a corollary that the plug needs a socket. And that socket is transformational leadership. Because whatever you have, whether you have democracy, no matter how defined, whether liberal or socialist or capitalist oriented or illiberal democracy, as some people would put it, you need transformational leadership to bring about development. And when you look at some countries, you ask yourself this fundamental question: do you need to democratize before you develop, or you need to develop before you democratize? That has always been at the core of understanding the connection and interconnection between democracy and development. I think when you look at Singapore, Malaysia, China, Japan, you discover that at times you don't need democracy defined in the Western conception, that you don't need this kind of liberal democracy to develop. But when you look at some other countries that we can describe as evolution countries like United States, United Kingdom, France, Belgium, you see that you may say, okay, probably you need some form of democracy to develop. But when you look at turnaround nations like Dubai, okay, you go to China, you go to Singapore, even Cuba, Comrade Aborishade talk about COVID. You see how Cuba has been able to help some countries. Even though Cuba is a small country, we cannot describe Cuba as a democracy in the Western sense. So having said that, I want to propose that we look at democracy not just as a liberal concept. We should look at democracy both as a concept and as a process. Nigeria and other countries in Africa, probably Nigeria is still probably 60 years old as an independent country, which means that we are still young, even though our democracy is no longer nascent. It shouldn't be nascent democracy in the sense that we have Ghana to learn from, even though it's a small country or a smaller country compared to Nigeria. We have Rwanda to learn from, a country that came out of, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, because somebody seems to be speaking under the background or something. Okay, thank you. So you have countries that you can learn from, like Rwanda, Ghana, and other countries that, even South Africa, of course, they also have their problem. But we should look at democracy not as a one-size-fits-all solution to our developmental dilemma. Democracy itself is not the only solution to underdevelopment. And that is why when you look at China and you look at probably Rwanda, you look at Cuba, you look at some other countries that are not as democratic in sense as some other evolution nations like United States and United Kingdom, you discover that democracy is not the only means to development. However, because democracy broadly defined means people participation, people orientedness, policies that are, homegrown. So Professor Ford was talking about maximal and minimal participation in political democracy. When you look at that, you see that, okay, probably you need democracy, okay? But we must know that democracy, at the end of this conversation, we cannot agree on a specific universal definition of democracy. It's not possible. The reason is because democracy is an essentially contested concept. Just like development, just like justice, just like equality, we cannot have a universally acceptable definition of democracy. But what should be very, very vital to our own democracy is that we must look at the 4 elements of democracy. Comrade Aborushade talked about constitutional, and I'm happy you linked it up with substantive. But we also have procedural and processual aspect of democracy. And these elements were put together by Charles Tilly in a book he wrote in 2003 titled On Democracy. So it is important for us that this conversation be guided with proper contextualization and conceptualization of democracy and development. What are those solutions that I think we can propose? Of course, Professor Lou talked about restructuring. Comrade Aborushade believe that restructuring is not the way out. I think maybe Professor Lokeshusi or someone also agreed with Professor Lowe. I think the most important thing is not whether we restructure or not, but what do we need to restructure? You see, some people have talked about political restructuring. They talk about we going back to 1963 Constitution or 1960 Constitution or 1979 Constitution, which is not fundamentally different from the 1999 Constitution anyway. What do we restructure? Is it the structure of governance? Is it the economy? You have to know what you essentially contest the concept on what I'm going to propose. Number one, that for you to have the kind of democracy that will lead to development, you will need to have electoral reforms. Because as Professor Soyinka once said, electoral integrity begets governance integrity. You cannot have proper governance in proper election. In other words, they will not give you what I call transformational leadership. What they will give you is transactional leadership. They just get there and sit as business as usual, grab whatever they can grab, then leave, or probably even not leave. They may want to perpetuate themselves into power. So we need electoral reforms that will give us governance reforms. Then number two, we need social orientation. Most of our people see democracy as a means to, as an end in itself. But if you listen to Comrade Aborushade, democracy is not an end in itself. It is actually a means to an end. And that end is development, human development, social development, political development, economic development, institutional development. If we see democracy as a means to an end, in other words, if we see democracy as a means to human development, political, economic, we will see democracy as something that is not restricted to political only. Democracy is not just about the political. You can democratize development even in the private sector. You can democratize development anywhere. So we must see democracy multisectorally. And if we now narrow down to sectors, like one of the earlier speakers talked about tourism development, that is also an aspect of development. So we must see democracy as something that is universal, both as a concept and in application. So apart from electoral reforms and social orientation, we also need to build our leadership potentials. In other words, we must have capacity to build transformational leadership. That is what happened in China under Chairman Mao. It happened in Japan. You see, even they survived Second World War. You remember Hiroshima, Nagasaki experience. Today, you go to Japan, it is another world entirely. You go to Dubai, which was a desert, you see it has been transformed. We need transformational leadership, which must be multi-sectoral. And we have to build it right from the primary, secondary schools, and not wait till these young people grow to become incorrigibly corrupt politicians. So we need transformational leadership, number 3. Number 4 is that we have to also try to link, and that is going to be the conclusion of this first intervention on my part. We have to look at democracy and development as Siamese twins. They are interwoven. We should know and think and act and improve on democratic development. In other words, we should develop democratic ethos and principles, you see, across all sectors. And we should also think in terms of developmental democracy. In other words, you have democratic development when you develop democracy. And you have developmental democracy when democracy develops, gradually. Because, to be frank, Prof and everybody on this panel, democracy disappoints. And it is not only in Nigeria. Even in developed countries like United States, United Kingdom, we have corruption, we have governance issues. One of the speakers said we shouldn't talk about good governance. I think I agree with that. But because it is already an idea that has been globalized, there's nothing we can do, because governance should just be governance. You see, it's either you have governance or you have misgovernance. Because the idea of good governance means that you have bad governance, and then governance becomes lost in the adjectivization of this particular concept of governance. In conclusion, for this first part of intervention, I'm saying that democracy is an essentially contested concept. It is a means to an end, not an end in itself. The end is development. Development itself is multi-sectoral, multidimensional, and we should look at development from the perspective of human development, political development, economic development, and what have you. So as we move on, we should know that good governance is the plug, okay, that connects democracy and development. But we also need to power that plug by having a socket. And that socket is transformational leadership, not transactional leadership. That is very common in Nigeria and many parts of Africa. Thank you for having me, and I will be glad to contribute more. God bless.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tunde Oseni, for that idea, the submission on transformational leadership. At this point, we have 2 more presentations before we take comments. But I would like to recognize Professor Tunji Oyeshile. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you, Professor Tunji Oyeshile is my teacher. I need to. But then I would like to call on Dr. Ellen Uga. Dr. Ellen Uga, you have the floor for 10 to 12 minutes, please. Unmute. You need to unmute from your side. Oh, cool.
Good afternoon once again. I would like to appreciate all the panelists so far. I've learned a lot from listening to everyone. Thank you very much for your awesome presentation. Now, before I start, I would like to agree with Professor Yebisi's arguments that democracy spells equal opportunity for all, normally, but in reality, that is not the case in Nigeria. Now, we all know that democratic government in Nigeria and other countries are practiced, it begins with election. Elections in Nigeria are always significant because during this time, politicians manifest their desire to be chosen to lead the country, and Nigerians themselves actualize their expectation of choosing the best candidates that will contribute to the development of the country. Moreover, democracy is highly representative. It is highly representative. Democracy is not totally representative in terms of gender. In the Nigerian socio-political sphere, only one gender has been known to control everything that happens in the country politically, and that is the male gender. Now, women are everywhere in the world, especially in Nigeria. Women account for about, I think, 51% of the Nigerian population, and they occupy core positions probably in the financial sector. There are notable women in the educational sector, and there are also women in businesses. But it is noticeable that women are absent in politics. Research has proven that women perform minimal roles in politics all over the world, especially in developing countries. Now, it has also been noted that in recent times, the leadership capacity of women has increased from 17 to 8% in 2008 to 23.5% in 2018. Most now in the Nigerian situation, the Nigerian Constitution submits or allows for 35% of women participation in politics. That is in theory, but in reality, since 1999 till date, the number of females or women in electoral position in Nigeria has not risen to up to 10%. The Nigerian political system has not been democratized enough to engage more females in political participation. A notable political scholar known as Professor Okume in 2003 asserted that Nigeria has one of the lowest female political participation in the world. And this claim is backed by UN when they assert that Nigeria globally ranks 181st position out of 193 countries in the world with the lowest female political participation. Now, despite the rising increase in issues of female political participation in the world, Nigerian intervention and also the intervention of notable NGOs, women's participation in Nigerian politics is still quite very low. For a country like Nigeria that claims to practice democracy, this is rather quite a shame. This is rather quite a shame. There are widespread practices that discriminate against women political participation in the country, and I think I will go through some of them in the course of my presentation. Now, one easily recognizable factor is the fact that, okay, it's in the aspect of policy. Now, everyone knows that policies are made to profit the policymakers. Every committee that sets up or makes a policy structures the policy in such a way that it will profit or benefit them. That is what happens in the case of Nigeria. Now, the Nigerian policy on politics or political policy is structured to favor the males because a lot of males make up the members of such committee. So for a patriarchal country like Nigeria, policies naturally favor the men and protect their own interests. Nigerian political parties' policy are created in a way that ensures that women are relegated to the background and they only perform roles that support the male, except on some very few occasions. Let me give you an instance of that. In the last conducted election, that was 2019 election, about 76 presidential candidates emerged. Out of that 76, only about 6 of those candidates were females. And towards the election, towards the time of the election, one of them withdrew our candidates, and that was the person of Dagili Ezekwesili. Presently, or as at 2019, when this data was collected by the UN, women occupy 5.8% in the Senate. In the last election, women vied for 232 women competed for the 109 senatorial seats, while 1,668 men contested for that same competition. Now, for the House of Representatives, only about 560 women competed compared to the about 4,139 men that competed for that same, for the 336 in the House of Representatives. Now, even in cases where women contest in the party primaries, they are barely voted for. So if democracy is representative, as we all claim it is, Why is it so? Why do women have few chances to be voted for in our country? The Nigerian democracy expects women to continue to play minimal role in politics. For instance, right now, I think about right now, the Nigerian Senate, there are only about, I think, 7 female senators compared to the 101 male senators that we have. Then in Nigeria, no female has ever emerged as governor of any state. And presently, there are, I think, maybe 4 or 5 deputy female governors. Now, we can argue that a number of women are gradually occupying elective and appointed position in the country, but it is still very low compared to that of men. And for me, this is not so encouraging. The narrative of democracy in Nigeria is highly gendered, and it represents females as incompetent political competitors who lack what it takes to successfully compete in a male-dominated world. Of course, we all agree that politics is a male-dominated world, especially in Nigeria. As a woman, if you want to compete, people ask, you're a female, what do you want to do there? All the people there are males. Are you sure you can compete successfully against them? That is what women usually face when they want to take up political position in the country. So for instance, women in politics are paying a huge price for their career. They are usually criticized, downtrodden, and advised to withdraw from competition. In some cases, they are threatened or blackmailed to opt out or discouraged from competing. Sometimes they are even harassed physically just to discourage them from competing. Then in some other cases, such as political and religious, sociocultural and religious constraints prevent women from political participation. Women do not get as much support as the men from the home fronts and from their various religious sects where they find themselves. Now, in the home front, it takes a good man to support a woman's political career, and we know what the Bible says about the good man. And even when the good man supports the woman, in-laws and other family members may want to discourage the woman from pursuing a political career. Now, we all know that a lot of women are mothers. Now, most women will not want to leave their children in the hands of some other person. They don't want to delegate the task of motherhood to some other person. So when they think about their children and the stress the children might want to go through, they are sometimes reluctant to pursue their political career. So yes, a lot of factors and domestic factors especially militate against women's participation in politics. The nature of Nigerian democracy affects women's capacity to promote their interests. This nature also impedes the level of political success of women. Now, Nigerian governments have subscribed to international agreements and instituted national policies to improve women's representation. But in practice, little have been done to implement concrete measures. In most cases, just like it occurs in all situations where injustice is done to women, the women often get blamed for their exclusion in politics. They're often accused of either not working hard enough, not being active enough, not being strong enough or smart enough to participate in the male-dominated world of politics. And in most cases, they are advised to withdraw or support the male politicians. Political parties even act as agents of patriarchy in nominating women for political participation. Come to think of it, how many women are nominated by political parties for various positions? How many political parties select women as their own representative? How many women even compete for the political party primaries? And even when they compete, how many votes do they get eventually? Now, most political parties do not support female participation. Women are not really, for me now, I think that based on all this, women are not really citizens in this country when compared to men, since women do not have equal political rights with women. I understand that we could argue that women themselves are not so interested in politics. A lot of them don't indicate interest. But what deliberate measures have been put in place to encourage women in this male-dominated career? How many male politicians have willingly made themselves seasoned mentors of females or funded female political careers? Now, we all know about the concept of godfathers in Nigerian politics. How many females have godfathers? Or how many godfathers, how many popular or wealthy Nigerians have funded women's political career. This is the reality of democracy and good governance in Nigeria. Women do not have democratic fulfillment in Nigeria. Women do not have equal rights with men politically and democratically. This can only happen if the Nigerian government and all political stakeholders practice gender equity and equality. Now, I don't think that gender equality will work so well for Nigeria if it's not combined with equity. With equity, women will be given all the help, all the mentorship, and all the support they need to have a successful political career. So it is when gender equity is put in place that gender equality would work very well. It's only when this becomes a reality that women can say that there is good governance in Nigeria and that the women are fulfilled. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Eldin, for that wonderful perspective from gender. We know that what we call democracy today won't have been achievable without women participation in the struggle to enthrone democracy. It's quite unfortunate that we find ourselves in a situation where our women do not have a voice. In Sweden, in Rwanda, women are celebrated and they are really high in terms of participation in governance. They are celebrating 32%, celebrating 35%, shifts from 25 to 32%, 35%. But here we are talking about less than 5%. That is really, really absurd. But it's still about democracy. And Dr. Idowu Johnson, I would like to tell our attendees to please, you can send your question and answer. And if you want to ask, just raise up your hand, just signify by show of hand. There is provision for that in the column, then I will recognize you to talk. So we're going to take the contribution of Dr. Idowu Johnson. Dr. Idowu Johnson, I can't hear you. You need to unmute. Unmute. Yes.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. You have the floor for 10 to 12 minutes, ma'am, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on this platform. I would like to start my discussion from 3 broad angles. The first one is I align with Comrade Femi Aborishade's comments. For us to understand what is democracy and development, we must first of all understand the character of Nigerian state. Like Comrade have said, Nigerian state is exploitative in nature, very rudderless, weak, and if I can say it popularly, it's an irresponsible state. It was a colonial entity. And for us to understand what obtains present Nigeria now, if you don't understand the character of the Nigerian state, there is no way you can understand what is democracy, what is good governance. Having said that, you must also look at the political culture of what they call Nigeria as an entity. The political culture is very funny. We have a lot of electoral crises, prebendal politics. We also have what we call patrimonialism and neo-patrimonialism. Again, there is no way you can understand democracy, development, and good government in Nigeria. We must also link in with 3 concepts: leadership, legitimacy, and good governance. There is no way you can have good governance or effective democracy if you don't have effective political leadership, either at the grassroots level or even at the upper level. What I'm saying in essence is that there's a connection between leadership recruitment and democracy, and also what we call development in Nigeria. Let me give a very good illustration here. In the 50s and early 60s, before you can become a good politician, you must undergo effective training in the area of either governance or in the area of other leadership position. Now let's look at Southwest as an example, or Western region then. Before you can serve under Awolowo as an entity, your political leadership skills must be tested either at the grassroots level as a councillor, If you perform very well, you move to the last cadre. Then from there, as a commissioner, if you perform very well, you are going to become a minister before you cannot be fighting for higher position. But what we have today, revert, is the case. And when I'm talking about democracy, I would like to pinpoint here that democracy, as we know it, is universal. But at the same time, we must also look at homegrown democracy. Now, in the 60s and 50s, when Awolowo was proposing is a kind of a leadership posture, he was not talking about democracy as we have it within the context of liberal democracy. He was referring to an homegrown democracy that will take care of the communal people. And that is the origin of what we call democratic socialism. But when we move up to the ladder by trying to embrace liberal democracy and embrace what we call good governance, as been propounded by Western scholars, the essence of embracing liberal democracy is to foster development of capitalism on the poorer countries. And the more you have capitalism entrenched in the guise of democracy, there will be a kind of inequality between the rich and the poor. And having said that, by the time we move forward, we can understand the fact that those countries and those Asian tigers that we are referring to today, they didn't embrace the liberal democracy as we have it in Africa. And they don't look at development agenda have been proposed by the Western countries. What they rely on is their homegrown style of political leadership, homegrown kind of development. And that's the reason why we are not celebrating countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, and China. Until when we address the peculiar nature of our own democracy, there is no way we can also have what we call effective development. Because development, as we have it, must also look at the political culture of every country. If you don't understand the political culture of your country and you embrace a Western democratic culture, development is impossible. Having said that, I like to align with Professor Ofo's idea of a political philosophy. Our state is not even giving out to what is expected of the citizens. And that's the reason why there is a mass revolt. What is still helping us today now is not because we are enjoying the democratic structure and we have in Nigeria. What is helping us today now is because we have what we call the spirit of communalism. Whereby maybe I'm a jobless person, I don't have any job, I can go and stay with my brother, my uncle, my friend, and we continue to help each other. But if those communalism is being erased, we are going to witness what is called massive revolution. And that's the reason why Comrade Abari Shade was talking about the essence of citizenship, participation in politics. Unfortunately for us, we have docile citizens. And that's the reason why most of our political leaders, they now capitalize on this, our docility, but trying to fix themselves. Even as I'm talking now, the person who's going to govern Nigeria in the next 30 years, they are going to place that person on board. The person who's going to be the next Inspector General of Police, they will put that person on board. But those people that are poor, the poverty level of Nigeria does not allow democracy to thrive, not to talk of development. In fact, we are deceiving ourselves. Development have not started at all in Nigeria, not to talk of democracy. Again, for us to have enduring democracy, we must also look at the tenets of democracy: accountability, transparency, openness, and equity. Unfortunately for us, all those tenets of democracy are very absent in Nigeria. If you interview 100 people on the street today in Nigeria, and you talk about what is democracy by looking at the tenets of democracy, 98% of them will tell you that we don't have democracy. What we have in Nigeria is not election. What we have is what we call selection of electoral notables. If you look at most of the elections that have been going on in Nigeria under the guise of the democracy, they are selected people. Once you have money, put it down, and that's the reason why you have a lot of electoral fraud. Again, if you want to have a good democratic structure in Nigeria, the litmus test from Edo State and Ondo State is a very good example. I don't know, I see no reason why some people are still following PDP, APC in a very mass movement. Because if you look at what we experience today, particularly from Edo, today a PDP candidate move to APC, the next one, APC candidate, move to a PDP. Is that a democracy? They don't have political ideology. Unfortunately for us, the citizens are very poor, and they capitalize on this poverty level of the citizens. If we have people that are having the basic things of life, social welfareism, I see no reason why an alternative political party, apart from PDP or APC, should not have taken over in Edo State. But because our leaders, they have already exploited the people, because of the weakness of the people, and because the character of the state is also flourishing. The state is too powerful that whatever they use, they can use the stick to destabilize the entire society. What is very important for us to do now is to have a massive enlargement, particularly campaign for the people, for the poor people. Because if we don't campaign for the people, we are going to be going back to the olden days of our lifestyle. And that's the reason I learned with Comrade Abolishade from the masses perspectives. It is only when we have a consciousness of ourselves that we can see that whether we are a citizen of the country or not. But if you are not conscious of ourselves, there is no way we can gain from democracy, not to talk of development. Most importantly, there is no way we can have effective democracy and good governance. Although good governance is very difficult to define, whether it is good or bad governance, what is important is that a country that we are living today, we must provide for the welfare of the citizens. Those people that are in foreign country, like United States, Ireland, not that they are doing more than us, but because the government are there to take care of the people. If you have basic things of life, you have nothing to be asking whether I want to go and revolt. Because people are so poor, and endemic poverty is allowing our leaders to exploit us. And that's the reason why we are now having different of militias. As I'm talking now, anybody that is telling us that Nigeria is not a fair state, that man is telling lies. Nigeria is a fair state because under a fair state, those things that are very important for the citizens, basic things of life, if a state cannot provide for it, is a fair state. If a state is not having good governorship structure, is a fair state. The absence of democracy qualifies Nigeria as a fair state. Look at what happens in the Northeast. Those of us that are in the South here, is because we have not felt the impact of that insurgency. And as I'm talking now, it is revolving around the state. Because once the state is also weak, that insurgency will also revolve the Nigerian society. And there's no way we can have insecurity and you're talking of development. They are not at the same level. Again, what is very important for us now as a citizen is to not to see ourselves as either Igbo, Yoruba, Jukus, or Thief. We must see ourselves as an entity, as a citizen, so that we can wrestle power with these people that are exploiting us. Because as I'm talking now, the jobs that are meant for those people that are first-class graduates have not been given to their children. And those people that are very brilliant, they will not go to other police to go and enlist, they will take it to a war front. These are the character of the Nigerian state we're talking about. It's exploitative. What is important for us to do now is to make sure that the poverty striking level in our mind to be removed so that we can have opportunity to select very good leaders who are going to represent us at the national level. On the final note, because one of those things I'm going to discuss here have been discussed by the panelists. Now, for us to move forward, we need to move back to what they call constitutional rearrangement or constitutional engineering. Because we are talking about restructuring. I do want to restructure Nigeria. When those people that are in National Assembly are the ones who want to restructure themselves. For us to restructure Nigeria, we must look at effective constitution. The constitution is the ground norm that we give out what we want in Nigeria. With that restructuring, with that constitutional rearrangement or re-engineering, Nigeria cannot move forward. It is when we rearrange Nigeria in a constitutional level, then we cannot talk about development. For now, democracy and development is not possible because there is absence of a good political leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Idowu Johnson, for that wonderful presentation, which you ended at constitutional engineering. Some of the submissions seems to be very related, some are very radical, some are liberal. And I think that is the ideal of this kind of discourse, that we are with people from different backgrounds, people that are even looking at it from the multi-sectoral angle to the solution of a failed state like Dr. Idu has referred to Nigeria. At this point, let me quickly tell our attendees and those watching us on Facebook Live that you can drop your questions. If you want to contribute from home, there is on the panel, you could raise your hand, signify by raising your hand, and then we'll take your question. At this point, I want to appreciate the founder, Afe Babalola, our founder, the founder of Afe Babalola University, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Smaranda Olarede, the Provost of College of Social Management Sciences, Dr. Ademola Aziz, my colleagues in the Department of Sociology, starting from Professor Israel Orubuloye, another colleague like Folukade Osun, Agbola Bayode, Juliana Esoso, and all other colleagues in the department. I really appreciate your support so far. I will not forget Noah Balogun, of course, and I will not forget Okpeyemi Folayan, Engineer Yebode has been one of our regular supporters. Agbola Mayowa, you have been a regular. Today we have Dr. Hilary also joining us. I really appreciate all of you and all other people that have been supporting us. We have one person, Kehinde Adegbite. You have 2 minutes. You can talk now. Unmute and talk. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Are you hearing me, sir?
We can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon. Well done, sir.
Yes.
I greet Comrade Femi Aborishade, Professor Dejo Olowu, and other panelists. This is an interesting conversation, a great one. I've learned a lot. Now, as to the moderator, I looked at the panelists generally. I know that this is a great conversation having to do with our country, the way forward, making Nigeria to work, because certainly it's not debatable that Nigeria is not working. But we don't have any representative from the North. We have scholars in the North as well. I think this kind of conversation should also include them so that we get their inputs, so that when we are talking about the perspectives of how we see things, democracy and development in Nigeria, let's get their own inputs too, so that they can, this message, this conversation can go nationwide.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
the vision. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I will talk to Bukunmi Olowu. You have the floor. Kumi Olowu, your question.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you very much to the panelists. My question is pretty simple. The issue of federal character, because I've listened to all the panelists and we appear to have an angst against the Nigerian system the way it is, which is understandable. However, the question of federal character, like the last person that just spoke now, who mentioned that there's no Nathana that is on the panel. In my mind, I was like, okay, so this person has actually also been inducted into this hall of fame where everything has to go around the country. I think that the issue of federal character, we need to address it, albeit that it is not a necessity that somebody must come from somewhere. Because going by I've followed from the inception of this session, and I remember that one of the panelists was mentioning the fact that the entity, as it were, is flawed. The entity, as it were, is not even available in the mind of the average Nigerian. Now, when you talk to an American, the American is talking to you about the United States with passion. You see the vigor. I mean, when Comrade Femi Aborishade was talking, when Mr. Idowu Johnson was talking, you could see the passion of Nigeria in their voice. But you see, Nigeria is not in the mind of the average Nigerian. And so when we want to talk about federal character, I think we need to address this need to please everybody. And I would appreciate if all the panelists, if not everybody.
Okay, they will address it. Okay, thank you, Kumi Oluwu. Engineer,
can at least have a merit in the Nigerian usage. I don't know if you understand my point, sir.
Yes,
so
of
because
course.
merit is not anything in Nigeria. Merit today has been played.
Thank you, Kumi. Engineer Yebode, I think what else? Who else? I think I saw a hand. I will just take two more and then we'll go. Any other person will take questions that were. I hope the panelists are taking note of some of these questions. We'll take them together in the all. Professor Low is gone. We have some questions that came in before we started. I'll just read one or two of them. The others, I'm sure you could see on the panel where they asked the questions. One by, sorry, this person sent the question before the event. And yes, one by Shankar Buba. Shankar Buba asked, the question by Shankar Buba, why has democracy not reduced the level of poverty in Nigeria? Comrade Aboishade, Professor for Dr. Elina Wuga, I think you can hear. Professor Lokeshusi, please take note, and also Dr. Edu. Why has democracy not reduced the level of poverty in Nigeria? That is Buba Shankar. Buba Shankar. There's also another one by Yomi Larika. Yomi Larika. He asked, without squarely confronting the national question, can there be any real democracy or good governance in Nigeria without squarely confronting the national question? Another question from Yomi Larika is, how can civil society organizations be empowered to play a more effective role in democracy and in growing the culture of good governance? That's a question from Yomi Larika. Is there any still listener that want to contribute? We still have 2 more minutes before we go to our panelists. Any other contributors from the attendees? Let's go to the Facebook. Yes, Engineer Yebode, you want to say something? Engineer Yebode, you have the floor. You want to ask a question?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
We can hear you, sir.
I'm really honored to be part of this discourse. My questions I've dropped it on the chat, but I will read it. What are your recommendations for better democracy, poverty reduction, and good governance in Nigeria?
Okay.
What are your recommendations for better democracy, poverty reduction, and good governance in Nigeria? That is one. Then 2, how can we rejuvenate our educational sector and awareness of populace for achievement of proper enforcement of laws, because the laws are in place, but some of these laws are not being enforced, corruption eradication, better democracy and good governance in Nigeria? I don't know whether the panelists are taking note.
Yeah,
then the third questions, what are your advice for current leadership, people in power and so-called present democracy system for the benefit of Nigerians? What are your advice for them, people in power? Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Engineer Yebode. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I'll take the last question. Agbola Mayowa, you have the floor. Agbola Mayowa, please unmute and ask a question. Yes. You have the floor. Agbola Lugbenga Maiwa, you have the floor. Unmute. Maiwa, okay, good. You have the floor, yeah, please. Your question. Agbola Maiwa, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, please. Okay, I'll read. His question is addressed to Professor Yebisi on how civil administration can work. Kumi, yes, Kumi, you have made your point. Thank you so much. Okay, Agbola Maiwa, I will read the question you have here. No doubt Nigeria is a failed state and nothing is working. What is the way forward to this mirage of problem mitigating against good governance in Nigeria? Okay, we'll go around and take the question. If Oluwa Bamidele has a question, is there any panelists who recommend an alternative to democracy? Is there any alternative to democracy? If Oluwa Bamidele ask the question. Okay, we'll go to our panelists. I'm sure you add all the questions. So, well, Professor Deji Olowu, you have 5 minutes to respond to the questions. 5 minutes. Professor Deji Olowu, yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. I have tried to respond to many of the questions in the background. As we were going on, I was responding to those who are sending questions. But there is something I need to correct. I wonder where the participants got the impression that I am a fan or supporter of restructuring. I said it point blank.
That is not.
In my own prognosis, restructuring is cosmetic, it is window dressing, it is futile. And I emphatically stated that it is a perpetuation of the entrenched falsehood, deceit, and fictions that had become hallmarks of Nigeria since the illicit amalgamation of 1914. I cannot subscribe to it. Look, you throw up a knife 1,000 times, it is going to fall flat on its side 1,000 times. That is the same equation that describes what people are prescribing concerning this restructuring. It is like medication for ringworm for someone who is suffering from leprosy. Dr. Idowu Johnson has said it, without alluding to what I had said at the opening statement, that the very foundations of Nigeria, and this is my own position, how can you talk about democracy? I was going to speak about democratic audit. I was going to speak about democratic quality. These are not concepts that are applicable to Nigeria because the foundations are simply not there. All that we call democracy in Nigeria are electoral processes. Whichever way you get into office, just get into office. Whether you kill 1,000 human beings, whether you kill 1,000 human beings to get into office, so be it. Good governance. How can you speak about good governance when governance is standing on broken legs? You see? And then development. Development will always be warped because the basic tenets of development were fraudulent. So how can you get positive development in a nation that is founded on foundations of fraud? So we have to go back to the basics, to the very roots, and look. And maybe I may not have another opportunity. Let me say this: all the scholars that write about the problems of Nigeria, they skirt around this fundamental issue because they do not want to offend their funders. They do not want to offend their backers. But we need to call a spade a spade. Nigeria is simply a metaphor of negativity. Without addressing that one, we are not going anywhere. You can bring an angel from heaven to be president, to be governor in Nigeria, that angel is going to fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Professor Francis Offor, unmute your 5 minutes contribution, sir.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me start with a note of a little disclaimer. Sorry. A little disclaimer. Well, Comrade Aborishade, I didn't say that democracy has no end state in the sense of democracy not having a goal in sight. Like Dr. Oseni rightly said, the end state of democracy is development. And the way he described it, development in all ramifications. But what I mean by saying that democracy has no end state is that it is not a completely made, completely defined and jacketed project. So that when it is handed down to us, we feel that we must key in line by line in order to achieve the required success. That's the point I'm making. And so there is room for improvement. That's why I said that becoming and dialogue are essential features we must take into notice when talking about democracy. In fact, Professor Yebisi talked about governance, taking people's historical experiences, individual and group preferences, and religious cohesion and others into consideration. These are issues. So the goal of any general democracy is development, like I said earlier. You see, what we have on ground in Nigeria is not democracy. Like I said earlier in my presentation, democracy is not just about the system of governance with certain ideals handed down from other clients for us to emulate. It's about a mode of governance by which any good government is run, no matter the institutional form. So we must begin to reflect and then to think about what to do in order to embark on the process that Professor Dr. Oseni described earlier on as democratic development. So that is where I'm going. You see, I would have opted for Professor, what is his name, Professor, that talked about civilian administration, but it would be confusing the word because in this area of globalization, such concepts would confuse the word as it is. So, and I am personally attached. I'm not thrown overboard the word democracy because of its etymological link with the people. Development is about the people. And so the people must come together. The people must come together to dialogue in order to start evolving or starting the process of democratic development. We must dialogue in order to start evolving the right structures, the right ideals and norms upon which our own project of democracy will be founded. So we are not late yet. We can still keep, but we must start afresh. What we have on ground is not democracy. That's why the answer to the question somebody raised about democracy not being able to alleviate poverty is very apt. What we have is not democracy in the general sense. All right, so we are still under the institution of material poverty because we are not practicing genuine democracy. But democracy has rules, has structures, has institutions, but this has to be discussed. We have to discuss them and then agree on what we want before we can then embark on the process of democracy. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Authentic democracy, yes. I am saying that by the time we have gone through the process of dialoguing, we'll come up with a model that will not be uniquely Western, but will bring into cognizance all of the items that other scholars have identified that we need to talk about, which are peculiar to us as a people here in this part of our world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Professor Lokechusi, your audio is connecting. Professor Lokechusi, do you have comments on some of the questions, sir? Professor Femi Lokechusi, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir.
The short one, it has to do with the issue of democracy and poverty alleviation or reduction. If we all take the definition of democracy as propounded by Abraham Lincoln, there's no reason why members of the political class should relegate equity and inclusiveness to the background. In fact, both should be at the forefront of whatever they are doing. But like Professor Lu rightly said, members of the political class are keen on themselves and perhaps members of their families rather than society. Secondly, those in the political class do not give voice to the governed. That is, participation is not what participation should be. Giving people 5,000, 2,000 during election days is not part of democracy. The point I'm trying to make is people who are so-called democratically elected are not keen on helping those not part of them. Therefore, the policies and programs put in place are not aimed at elevating or reducing poverty of the Nigerian citizenry. Rather, you see someone embezzling 4 billion, 10 billion, and yet members of his or her own family are wallowing in poverty. So until we practice democracy the way it should be as our own approach to realizing governance, because there are several ways of governance, sorry. So the other point has to do with the lack of voice of our people, and this does not give the governed the voice to query those ruling them, the rulers, the leaders, the political class. What are you doing with our money? And until and unless we start asking questions, we will continue to wallow in abject poverty. Lastly, there is this issue of not involving the poor or the governed in project and policy formulation. Politicians just come and they tell you they have 10-point agenda, 5-point agenda, without any survey to ascertain the real needs of those governed. So at the end of the day, nothing meaningful will be achieved because they are probably not addressing the root cause of the problem. Rather, they are just feathering their own nests. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Coming from Aborishade, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. And let me admit that I have also learned a lot from the contributions of members of the panel and those who also made contributions, asked questions. I want to begin by talking about restructuring issue again. The reason why I maintain that restructuring is not the solution to the problems plaguing Nigeria is fundamentally because even if restructuring takes place, the problems we are witnessing in Nigeria today will be multiplied and replicated in each of the social units, geographical units into which Nigeria may be restructured. Rather, I advocate that the basic needs of ordinary people, which are captured under Chapter 2 of the Constitution, should be implemented. That is the major constitutional amendment that we need. I advocate that either we delete Section 6, subsection 6C of the Constitution, which provides that the provisions of Chapter 2 are not justiciable, or we simply take the contents of Chapter 2 to chapter 4. Chapter 4 provides for fundamental rights. The most important rights are the socio-economic rights guaranteed under chapter 2. In the South African Constitution, for example, there is no demarcation between fundamental rights and socio-economic rights. All they have in the South African Constitution is a Bill of Rights. So let us have in Nigeria a Bill of Rights which will include the socio-economic rights under chapter 2 of the Constitution. Those rights under chapter 2 of the Constitution should be regarded as the citizen's right, the right of a citizen of Nigeria. And when those rights are implemented, Nigeria will exist in the mind of the ordinary Nigerian. Today, that is not the case, as one of the participants observed. Where the argument is that chapter 2 is not justiciable. And I say, under the Constitution, chapter 2 is justiciable. The only problem we have is that the judiciary has maintained a political interpretation of chapter 2, the justiciability or non-justiciability of chapter 2. Because if we go by section 1, subsection 3, the Constitution is supreme, and chapter 2 is part of the Constitution. If you go to section 13 of the Constitution, it provides that all authorities and persons exercising legislative, judicial, and executive powers shall give effect to chapter 2. If you go to section 224 of the Constitution, it provides that every political party shall have aims and objects that are in conformity with chapter 2. If you go to the oath of office, which all of those who claim to win elections swear to uphold, they swear to uphold the entire Constitution, including chapter 2 of the Constitution. So the interpretation by the judiciary is political. It is not judicial. Now, better democracy. As far as participation, if we conceptualize popular participation to constitute part of better democracy, then I would advocate that we should oppose, we should modify or amend sections 221, 222, and 223 of the Constitution. These sections provide that before you can contest election, you must be sponsored by a political party. Before a political party can be registered, that political party must exist as a national party in the image of the Nigerian Police Force, for example, that exists everywhere in all the 774 local governments in Nigeria. These conditions can only be met by people who have looted our common patrimony. Rather, we should advocate that small parties should be able to exist in their wards, in their local governments, or in the state. Parties should not necessarily have to have national structures in every state of the federation before they are allowed to participate in an election. Then independent candidacy should also be allowed. Now, somebody also posed a question about that what we have, the observation was made correctly, that what we have really is not democracy. And I agree. What we have today in Nigeria is democracy of the rich. The ordinary people are excluded. And that is why recently, small parties that do not have money to induce or to inflict pains and pangs on the people have been deregistered. Chief Gani Fawehinmi went up to the Supreme Court to liberalize the conditions of registration of political parties under the platform of the National Conscience Party, of which I was the founding general secretary, national general secretary. That party today has been deregistered on the basis that we have not been able to win elections. Parties should not necessarily exist to win elections, even though that may be their goal. So people, ordinary people are excluded. If you don't have money or you don't have the capacity to kill and maim, you cannot win election in Nigeria. Now, somebody also talked about advising the current wielders of political power in Nigeria. Well, generally speaking, I do not advise those who wield political power, because they do what they do deliberately. So it is not advice they need. We need to organize and fight for our rights. Rights are never given on a platter of gold. Rights have to be fought for and won. Those who are wielding political power, they cannot give up their rights. I mean, their so-called rights, without a fight. Then there's the question about why democracy has not reduced the level of poverty. My simple response to that is that what we have is actually not democracy, as one of the speakers already mentioned. The poor are poor because the rich are rich. The rich are rich because the poor are poor. The process of the enrichment of the rich is simultaneously the process of dispossession and impoverishment of the mass of the people. That is why, like I pointed out earlier, there has been a paradigm shift in terms of what the role of the state should be in the economy. In the past, pre-1986, the state was concerned with the general well-being. Today, the perception is that the private sector is the engine of growth. We need to insist that the state should assume primary responsibility for economic growth, but not only economic growth, but for development, because there is a difference between economic growth and development. Whereas economic growth is concerned with increase in production, rise in the GDP, development is concerned with whether or not the people are living better lives. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Comrade Aborisade. Thank you so much. To come back and take other call. Dr. Tunde Oseni, your response, sir. Dr. Tunde Oseni. Dr. Tunde Oseni. Dr. Oseni.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yeah. Exactly, yes. Thank you so much. I think so far so excellent, and I can say that this discussion has been intellectually stimulating and enriching. Now, let me quickly point out that I like the clarification made by Professor Lowu that he is actually not in support of restructuring, but there's nothing bad in being in support of restructuring. But what is most important is what restructuring. And I think because it has become a buzzword, many people are confused whether they're talking about political restructuring or economic restructuring or any kind of institution. Because the party in power, APC, promised restructuring as one of their campaign promises. they promised to restructure. And so people are confused about what is restructure. Then secondly, when Professor Offord talked about cynicism, he's actually not talking about pessimism. So as Nigerians, as scholars, we should be skeptical about what politicians do and about the nature of our state and about the economic and political progress we've made so far and our potential and capacity to even do more. But we should never be pessimistic. We should always be optimistic. That way, we'll be able to contribute our own quota, both intellectually and socially, towards the development of our country, including human development, political development, economic development, and social development. Now, I want to quickly respond, not necessarily react, to the position of one of the panelists. I think Dr. Let me check the name, Dr. Ellen Uga, who look at this debate from the perspective of gender, which is very, very important because when we talk about inclusion, and I think Bukumi, although we also talk about, people talk about federal character and all that. You know, democracy cannot be complete without inclusiveness. So whether you talk about inclusiveness in terms of gender, or inclusiveness in terms of ethnic balance, or inclusiveness in terms of regional balance, you must promote one kind of inclusiveness or the other in order to have democracy and democratic development as well as developmental democracy. So it is important to know that inclusiveness is important. However, let us also try to look at it more critically and objectively. When we say that women are not allowed to participate, we are actually not saying the entire truth. Of course, structurally, women are restricted because when you look at politics, politics is largely masculine because particularly in Nigeria and elsewhere, you see it requires a lot of ruggedness, and people also look at politics, particularly in this climate, from being able to promote violence, because violence is used during election. It is just recently that violence has remained minimal. But when you look at 2003, 2007, and partly probably 2011 election, you will see that violence is still a part of our own kind of election. So women are scared, to participate. That one is a fact. But apart from women being scared to participate, you also discover that money politics has reduced the capacity of women to be included into our own democracy or democratic practice. So you see, you want to be a governor, they ask you to bring millions of naira to even get the nomination form or even to get your party nomination. I remember vividly, and all of us should remember, in 2011, a woman, Sarah Jibril, came out to contest in the PDP, and she was the only woman. When they counted the votes, President Jonathan and Atiku came first and second respectively. Sarah Jibril got one vote, just one vote, which means that it was only Sarah Jibril that voted for herself. So there's no doubt that structurally, in terms of money politics and violence, being major forces and factors determining political participation or political career, women are disadvantaged. Nevertheless, we should know that this is not unique to Nigeria, because whereas in Rwanda, you have more women in parliament. If you go to the United States, you have a woman speaker, but US is almost 300 years post-independence. You see, and there's never been a woman president. United Kingdom has had Theresa May recently, who resigned in May last year, and they had the Iron Lady, you discovered that Margaret Thatcher, discovered that women have always been disadvantaged. And so we have to work around our structure to ensure inclusiveness. And inclusiveness must also take care of even the physically disadvantaged, the physically challenged, women. We must have a structure that balances regional and ethnic discrepancies. So it is important to look at it. However, I'm going to leave on that note that whereas governance is the plug that connects democracy with development, transformational leadership is the socket that will help us power that plug so that the plug, the link between democracy and development will not be weakened. This democracy is nascent, 21 years, but we can do better. And we must look at the nature of our state, our political economy, our laws, our constitution, and virtually everything that determines how democracy works. But we should know that democracy is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We also need social orientation. We also need legal reforms. We also need even family settings. We must begin this value orientation from the basic unit of society, which is the family. Nevertheless, democracy and development are interwoven, but transformational leadership, as we have seen in Singapore, in China, in Japan, elsewhere, is the link between democracy and development. Thank you for having me on this wonderful webinar. I appreciate the Department of Sociology of ABUAD, and in particular, Professor Ademowo and all participants. It has been intellectually captivating so far, and I'm happy to be part of this particular event. God bless you. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ellen Uga, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to pick for, okay, yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to continue from where Dr. Tunde Hussaini just stopped. He continuously mentioned inclusiveness. Now, I agree with some of his stance on women and political participation, but okay, that takes me to the beginning of my argument or my response. Now, every political appointment starts with election. Why does election have to be so violent? Why does violence has to be the beginning of every assumption of power in Nigeria? Fine, women don't like violence. Women cannot cope with the violence. But if Nigerians find a way around limiting, reducing, or totally alleviating violence with election, I'm very sure that a lot of women will come out for, will want to vie for electoral position. That also brings me to the question of funding and money. Now, we all know that politics in Nigeria costs a lot of money because the politicians or those that want to vie for posts have to settle a lot of people. But if our elections are free and fair, money does not necessarily need to go around. And of course, if the godfathers or people that are so wealthy enough to fund other politicians can see these women as assets, they will fund them as well without asking for anything in return. But because Nigerian politicians are so corrupt that they don't want to give anything for free, it seems that there's no hope for women occupying more position, more political position in the nearest future. Now, another issue I would like to raise is that of that which is still connected to inclusiveness, is that of youth participation in politics. Now, democracy in Nigeria so far, to the best of my knowledge, has been a reading of recycled politicians. And since the inception of democracy in Nigeria, the same set of people that have ruled us before are ruling us again now. And I don't know, it's actually the roots of Nigeria's problem. We don't have new people, we don't have new hands, we don't have people with bright ideas that are in power. The people are in power. The people that are presently in power in Nigeria are people that have made money from Nigeria and want to keep on making money. They are old and naturally and normally they should be retired. They should be in their maybe in their villages or family houses retired. We'll find them actively participating in Nigerian politics. The youth do not have a say in the country's political affairs, except when they are employed as thugs during elections. It's only during elections that we see Nigerian youths actively working. They're working to protect the interests of these thieves. I'm sorry to use the word these thieves. And after the election, nobody cares about them. They go back to their joblessness. They go back to whatever it is they were doing before the election, poorer than they've ever been. So I think that the problem with Nigeria, of course, has to do with the electoral process. Nigeria should just stop voting for people that have money or voting for people that are popular. Nigerians are too laid back when it comes to the issue of picking our political leaders. We should hold our political leaders accountable. Until the political leaders are held accountable for their elections, for their actions before and after elections, there will be no sustainable development in this country. Democracy will not in any way favor any Nigerians. The poor will continue to become poorer, and the rich will continue to become richer. And everything still revolves around corruption. Like the rate of corruption in Nigeria is quite alarming. Like it's it's so ridiculous that corruption in Nigeria is a new normal, and it's a shame. And it's a shame. I don't know why our leaders will just sit comfortably. Do you understand? And knowing fully well that most of the politicians at the end of affairs are corrupt and will not want to do anything about it. So I think that, I'm sorry to say, but I think what Nigeria needs right now is to scrap all the old leaders. We should have an age limit for those that want to vie for election. Like maybe we should put an age range, maybe 35 and 50, or maximum of 60. And anybody that is above 60 should not have any business contesting for any political position in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eileen Uga. I'm sure the old one who are listening will want to react. Before I take the contribution of Dr. Idowu Johnson, and then I will take the parting shot from everybody after Dr. Idowu Johnson. For our attendees who are Alfa Babalola University students who are online now, send me your name, your matric number, and your phone number. Dr. Gboyega Babalola, who is the member of Governing Council, has decided that I should give you data for being on the webinar. If you are a student of Alfa Babalola and you are listening, or you are part of the attendee, please send me a message with your matric number and your phone number. Dr. Gboyega Babalola asked me to give you data, to support you with data for attending the webinar. It's his own way for encouraging us. Dr. Gboyega Babalola is the son of the founder. He's a lecturer in the Department of Business Admin. He's a member of the Governing Council, and he has been supporting this webinar from day one. So if you're a student of Alfa Babalola, you are listening, send your matric number and your name, and your phone number, then we'll send the data to you for reimbursing your data. It's called data gifting. Dr. Idowu Johnson, you have your 5 minutes to react to some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you are hearing me now.
Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah. I'm going to look at some of the comments from our colleagues there, particularly on recommendations on how can we resolve or reduce the issue of poverty, good governance, and the general sector. I'm also going to look at what are the advice for our leaders in terms of good governance. And at the same time, if you say Nigeria is a failed state, what is the way forward to make sure that Nigeria is coming back to a contemporary state of its own? And again, the issue of what is the alternative to democracy. Now, when I started my presentation, I argued that Nigerian state, the character of Nigerian state is flawless because it's a colonial entity. And once you have a state that is based on colonial entity, there is no way that state, we have to take it up for the citizen of that country. And also talk about because of the fact that democracy that was imported to Nigeria is in form of liberal democracy, which is to promote capitalism. And that's the reason why there is endemic poverty. Because those people that are participating in that governance are those people that have access to the state fund. No, I've said the state is very weak, it's irresponsible. Those people that are capitalists, they have captured the state, they have captured the Nigerian state. And there's no way a very poor citizen can also have a say, either to participate in politics or to go for elective posts. Again, if we say we should advise our leaders, my advice to our leaders is that once they fail to make sure that Nigeria is being governed according to the rule of the game, the implication is that the future of Nigeria depends on their children. But the problem is that when their children take over, the children of the poor who doesn't have access to education or who doesn't have access to good livelihood now, we take off all those poverty in the nearest future. Again, we are talking about the educational sector. I've mentioned that the problem with Nigerian citizens today is that we are very docile. We don't talk. Comrade Aborishade have said it. We are our leader. Why is it that we are in the problem now? Hello?
We can hear you, sir.
Why can't you be asking us, our leaders, some question? Why can't we say that? Why is it that university have been closed down for the past 4 months? Why can't the parents be saying that? What is the problem? The parents are looking. They know that there's a problem at the university level, secondary school level, primary school level. They are not asking. I remember that we, as a student at the Gary level, we normally question the authority. Not on the violence level. We write a lot of articles. I've not seen any reasonable student questioning the problem of democracy in Nigeria, questioning the problem of development in Nigeria. The parents are also weak. They only know about the material things of the world. They don't even ask questions that why is it that our children are not going to school? They only left everything to the hands of those people that are civil society organizations. And that's the reason why we have a problem today. Again, when we say the state has failed, and what is the way forward? A state will continue to fail if the leaders are not ready to govern us according to the rules of democracy. The rules of democracy are there. Openness, accountability, transparency. But in Nigeria, those people that are being elected are not elected per se. They are being selected of what we call selection of electoral notables. I'll give you an example of what obtains in Edo State now. If it's Nigerian democratic structure, PDP and APC will not even click the election. They won't win that election. But because we are very, very poor, they were using, in fact, it's not election in Nigeria, is money. They were using money to buy them. I mean that they are not using money to buy them. The contestants under APC and PDP, they will fail hopefully. But because they know that the state has captured our mind, and at the same time, there's no way we can move forward. What is alternative democracy? I've argued that even if you look at what Awolowo practiced in the 50s and early 60s, it doesn't practice what we call liberal democracy. It practiced the principles of communalism by injecting what they call democratic socialism. Today, France is not a pure democratic state, we don't know. What obtains in France is element of what we call social welfareism, indirect way of practicing what we call socialism. But if you go to France today, you can see that the people are equal in the area of education, in the area of employment. Even if you look at all those Asian countries, they are not pure democracy. They are totalitarian, British dictatorship. But what obtains there is that they take into consideration the sovereigns, those people that are sovereign, and also the nature of the citizens there. And that's the reason why you see that China is a dictatorial government, but the citizens enjoy what it entails in terms of development. So we need also to go back to that age. Nigerians were disappointed when Buhari came to power. Most people voted for Buhari based on the fact that the Buhari we knew in the 1980s, that it is coming, it's going to capture those people that are thief, those people that are corrupt, and put them in the gallows. But unfortunately, the reverse is the case. Go to China, go to Malaysia, go to Singapore. Once you are in the area of corruption, you know what it means.
Dr. Johnson? Dr. Johnson? Okay, there's technical issue. Professor Swall, I can see my guy there, Professor Chris Bokolo. Every say hello to Professor Bokolo, I say hello to him there. Guys, salute. Okay, we are finally coming to the end.
God bless you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, sir.
All right, I have passed on your message.
Okay. Now, we are running off the webinar gradually. We are coming to the end of the webinar, and we just want to. I want all our panelists. I thank them for their time. Well, we'll take a parting shot, just one minute closure from them now. It could be just way to reinforce what you have your position, or to just close your point. So I'll start with Professor Francis Offor. Your closure, your parting shot.
Thank you very much.
2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
It is clear from all we have said that what we have here in Nigeria is not democracy. In fact, what we have here is a complete aberration of democracy. Now, in a genuine democracy, like Uja insisted, you don't have to hold political office holders to be accountable. You don't have to hold them to be accountable. They will just be accountable, because that is one of the features of democracy. You don't have to go to the streets to insist on free and fair elections. There will just be free and fair elections. Look at Nigeria. Some years back, in Rivers State, to be precise, it was reported that the number of votes that was declared for a particular government candidate were actually more than a number of citizens that registered on the voters list. So what are you talking about? So what we have is not democracy. We are a unique people. And what I'm saying is that as a unique people, this is very important in evolving a mode of democracy that will serve our purpose. We just have to come together and talk. We must discuss. We've been discussing, but there must be a better forum for us to calibrate this point so that we'll know where we are going. We can evolve a model that is uniquely ours and that will serve our purposes. That is the point I'm making. What we have been doing over the years is to try to jumpstart Western-style democracy on Africa's political tarmac that went upwards. It has not worked, it is not working, and it will never work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Professor Lokeshusi, sir. Your parting shot, sir. 1 minute, sir. Your parting shots. Professor Lokeshusi. Your parting shot, sir. Professor Lokeshusi. Professor Lokeshusi, can you hear me? Your
yes,
parting
I can
shot.
hear you.
Yeah, your parting shot,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I am also in support of the last panelists that we should broaden the scope of this topic. I mean, we should repeat this, if possible, with a wider audience. And also, we all should continue to talk to our politicians, talk to the electorate, and hopefully they will change and democracy will be upheld in the country, and they will receive the so-called dividends of democracy. I can see Professor Comrade Aborishade shaking his head. We need to talk. Without talking, I'm not sure people are willing to change, because we cannot decree that people should uphold the tenets of democracy. We need to talk to convince them why they should do so, what other countries that have done so are benefiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Dejolu, your parting shot, sir. 2 minutes. Your parting shot, Professor Dejolu. Your parting shot. We can't hear you. Unmute. 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 You need to unmute, sir. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Okay. All right. You can hear me now.
Yes.
You can hear me.
Yes. Your parting shot.
Even now?
Yes. We can hear you. We can hear you now. We
You
can
can hear me now.
Yes, sir. Your parting shot. 1 minute.
On my own part, it's been a great day. But take note, the last time Nigeria had a constitution that genuinely started with "we the people" was 1963. Since then, the country has been living on false existence until Nigerians own Nigeria. We are all just merry-go-rounding and monkeying around. We are not going to get anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Comrade Aborishade, your party shot, sir.
Thanks so much.
2 minutes, sir. 2 minutes.
Okay. I was shaking my head in opposition to the perspective that we should talk to the politicians to change. No, 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 no. No ruling class gives up its privileges without pressure from below. They will not change by talking. In actual fact, the Nigerian people, ordinary people, should perceive the average politician as the problem of Nigeria. We should not see them as the friends of the masses. They seek public office to use public power against public interest. We should advocate not just for regime change. We should advocate system change. The politicians of the main political parties will reorganize, and they may give themselves a new names, as if we have something new, as if they have changed. No, that is not the way to go. The system change that I mean is what the ordinary people can easily understand. Let us advocate programs of poverty reduction programs to reduce income inequality, such that those who seek public office should not be paid. If they must be paid at all, they should not be paid more than the minimum wage. I contested in Oyo State in 2003 to be governor of Oyo State. And I contested on the program of a governor on a worker's wage. And that idea is not original to me. I borrowed it from Lenin, who, as leader of the Soviet Revolution, was earning the average salary, because socialist democracy is about income, reducing income inequality. Therefore, if those who occupy public, who contest to occupy public office will be paid at all, they should not be paid more than the national minimum wage. In that way, only those who are ready to serve the public would occupy the political space. For now, only those who seek to serve their own selfish interests are in power.
Thank you, sir.
Ordinarily, the average politician is the problem of Nigeria. We should not see them as friends. Let us advocate programs of income, reduction in income inequality, poverty reduction programs, so that we have a better society.
Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Ellen Uga, your final shots, ma'am. Your party shots.
Well, okay, I would like to say that, okay, the problem with Nigeria is that we talk too much. Our problem is we are all words and no action. So beyond holding our leaders accountable, beyond having panels like this and discussions like this every now and then on TV, on radio, writing newspaper opinion articles and the rest of all that, I think there needs to be a form of action. Like, if it entails maybe a national protest or violence, I think at this point, the situation of things in Nigeria has gotten to a place where Nigerians have to exude a form of violence, or have to show a form of violence towards our political leaders before things can change. These leaders need to be afraid that they get into power and they don't fulfill their promises to the masses, something will happen to them. I don't think they will change. So beyond talking, we need to act. We need to do something to make them afraid of going there to steal money or do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellen. I want to thank all our panelists for today. Professor Dejo Oluwu, thanks so much for your time. Professor Francis Ofor, I appreciate you. Professor Mr. ABC, who has to leave for a meeting, thank you so much. Professor Femi Lokechusi, you are appreciated. Dr. Tunde Oseni, thanks so much. Mr. Femi Aborishade, thank you so much. Dr. Ellen Uga and Dr. Idowu Johnson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your contributions. What I know and what the program is all about is that we continue to have the dialogue between the town and the gown. The gown say a lot in journal, publish a lot in journals, which our colleagues read, but we don't get to meet the common people on the street. That is why we have the likes of Comrade Aborishade, who is on the street, who take the Lenin from financial theories down to the people when he decided to contest. That is why sometimes I appreciate people like Julius Oyobere, who has been a lecturer in Texas, who is currently an honorable member, and all other academics who are raising serious issues in the National Assembly and beyond. I agree with you, Dr. Ellen. We say a lot, but of course, we are academics. We are within the 4 walls of the university. We only need to theorize. We need to find solutions. Sometimes we need to get the solution out for others to implement. And that is why this kind of program, to let the public know what we are doing and what we are doing within the 4 walls of classroom, within the 4 walls of our university, and in Ghana, wherever we are. I want to thank all our listeners for today, all our attendees. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the founder, Ariafeba Balola, my Vice Chancellor, Professor Smada Halarinde, my Provost, Ademola Aziz, all members of the Department of Academic Staff of the Department of Sociology, and our non-academic staff, as well as all students who participated in today's webinar. Our panelists, we are grateful. Thanks so much. We'll call on you next time. You'll be able to join us. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you very much, sirs. Amma.